Hi, my name is Mr. Morzinski, and I'm the Marist chess moderator. I've been doing this for the past 9 years. Last 6 years, we've actually gone to the state, and 6 of those years, we've actually won a medal. So we're excited to have you here for this chess camp. We're going to start with the basics of chess to start out with, which is basically just what the pieces are, what the pieces do, what the board looks like, and how you use the board. We'll get an introductory moves, and then we'll do some defensive moves as well. So hopefully you can put it together while you're at home, and you can play with your friends on either online or if you have an app that you can use, and just get the feel for it before we hopefully meet in September. So first off, main thing that we want to look at is first off that each player has 6 types of pieces. They have 8 pawns, 2 rooks, 2 knights, 2 bishops, and a queen, and of course the king. At the beginning of a game, you find 32 pieces on the chessboard, so that means there's 16 pieces on each side. Half of them are white, half of them are black. White pieces have the option of going first. Black pieces obviously will have the other option that is deferred to them. It used to be that white went first, but some people that were white didn't like doing it, so they decided to make it their option, whether they want to go first or whether they want to go second, depending on if they want to open the match or not. The chess pieces, the king piece actually moves in one square in any direction at any time. So as long as the square is not attacked by the enemy piece, you cannot put your king in danger. So you have to make sure when you move the king, it is in a spot where it cannot be captured. If you move it to a spot that cannot be captured, you have to move it back to that place and you have to go back to the drawing board. It's also important to note that in our conference and the state series, that once you touch a piece, you have to move that piece. So it's important that you think long and hard before you choose the piece that you're going to move to make sure that you know you're going to move that precise piece. Otherwise, you are going to have to move it, and it may not be a move that you want to do. So it's important that you take your time when you're playing. There's also an important move with the king that I'll teach you about later on too, called castling, and I'll talk to you more about that in video number 2. The piece that'll be next to the king is the queen, and the queens pretty much can move any way that they want to move. They can move diagonally across the board, they can move horizontally, or they can move vertically, and they can do that for any number of squares. So unlike the king, which can only move 1 square at a time, the queen can move as many squares as you want at a time to each end of the board. You are not allowed to jump over pieces with the queen though, so that piece has to be, the square that you're moving to has to be open. Unless, of course, you're capturing a piece. Once you capture that piece, that is the spot that you would stop on. Rooks move horizontally or vertically any number of squares. If you're unfamiliar with the rook is at the far end of the board. It's the little castle piece. They are unable to jump over pieces too. And rooks will move when the king castles, which we'll talk about later on. But basically, rooks move vertically, horizontally, in straight lines only, and they can move as many spaces as you want or until you capture a piece. Bishops move diagonally up any number of squares. Bishops are the ones that are going to be next to the king and queen. They have the little point at the top of their head. They move when the king castles, but they move diagonally. They also cannot jump over pieces, so you can move them diagonally as many spots as you want. You'll notice that you have 1 on a white space and 1 on a black space, which means you can diagonally move across the black spaces or across the white spaces, which either one that you want. But again, you can do that as many times as you want until you capture a piece or until you reach the end of the board. Knights. Knights are the little horse piece, and they move in an L shape. They actually go 2 squares horizontal and then 1 vertical direction, or however you want to do that. So it's 2 squares up, 1 square over each time with that. And they are the only piece that are actually able to jump over pieces. So they have to move in that L shape each time. So even if there's a piece in the way, you can still move it, or of course you can move it in that L shape to capture the piece as well. Pawns are the front line. They're the little pieces with the little ball at the top of them. They're going to move vertically forward 1 square at a time. However, when you start the match, that is the only time a pawn can move 2 squares. So when you start, if you want to move 2 squares, you can do that, or if you want to move 1, that's fine, but after that, the pawn can only move 1 square at a time. When they are not capturing a piece, the pawn must move in a straight line, so it can only move vertically on the board. When you are capturing a piece, though, the pawn will move diagonally to do that. So if you get to a pawn and a pawn is directly in front of your pawn, you cannot move and your opponent cannot move. However, if your opponent has a pawn next to you on the square and it's one diagonal square away, you can capture that pawn with your pawn. So that's primarily the pieces. You'll notice the board. The board is set up, it has numbers on the side of it and letters at the bottom. That is for you to take notation. And we'll talk more about notation when we actually get into the classroom, because that'll be a lot easier to do that way. But that's a way that you can record all of your matches, so that after you're done with your match, you can actually go and you can recreate that match. So you can go and you can look at what mistakes you made, what good moves you made, and you can go back and review it with yourself or your teammates or your coach or whomever you want. That's a way that we do that. That's also a way in the state series too, that if someone says that you did something wrong, you can go back to your notation sheet and say, no, I actually did this, and we can see that way that you did not do something wrong, or if there is an abnormality in the match as well too. So it's a way of proving that your match is accurate as well. Okay, well that's the end of step one here, day one. I will be back with day two, which is basically introductions in chess and how we're going to start the match off, whether you're white or whether you're black, and just the way that you're going to start to make sure that you can control the board as best as possible. I will see you on day two.